Hello there, welcome back. I'm going to talk today about a new release over here called Demonic, directed by Neil Blomkamp. Now this is a film that has had pretty bad reviews. This has been like butchered by the critics. It's like, wow, a lot of people really hate this film. And it's, of course, it's by a former darling of theirs, Neil Blomkamp, who made District 9, Elysium and The Chappie, and his films have been becoming less and less critically acclaimed as he goes on, which is weird because I started to like his films more and more as they go on. but he is a film director with lots of ideas, and sometimes those ideas don't come across well. I mean, there was, for me, the idea of all this was in Elysium, the final third of it, where it went into like weird magic as a science thing, which really annoyed me, and it kind of ruined the goodwill of the rest of the film. So, he's not a perfect director. Even Demonic, even though I'm going to defend Demonic, there are problems. He is a director who doesn't seem to be that good with actors. I think if he gets a good actor like Shalto Copley, who can take the project by the hand and deliver a great performance, and everyone else lives up to it around him, then he's good. But I think he's problems bringing it out of people who are not actors or who don't have... I don't think he's the greatest director of actors. I think he's interested in ideas, and he lets the actors be, and sometimes it means some actors give kind of generic performances, and some actors are a bit too broad. I just think it's that kind of thing with him, is like he's just not an actor director, so it's potluck. So, like in Chappie, Hugh Jackman was pretty broad. It was like, he should have been brought down a bit. But because he was going to say to Hugh Jackman less when he needed to. But it's not something like Elysium, the acting was fine, but some of the plotting wasn't. So, I think he has a lot of ideas. I think District 9 was such a simple idea. It was a sci-fi movie about immigration. Everyone got it, and everyone was behind the character, and everyone understood the A to B of the plot, and everyone was happy with it, and he was so overhyped, that film, for just doing a basically good film. That actually annoyed me when I saw it, because it was so hyped when I saw it. I was like, is that it? And then I saw it later, and I was like, that's actually quite good. It's just that it was so hyped up that it could never live up to the hype that people were giving this film when it was released. Then Elysium came out, and Elysium didn't do as well critically, but it did well. But it was one of those ones that was like, the first 2/3 are good, the end's too actiony. I feel like a studio thing, and you kind of get the feeling from his interviews that there was a studio thing, that the ending was too action-packed, and it was like, because it was going well until then, and suddenly it was like, became a silly movie, and it was like, well, what is this? It was one of those things you feel the director and the studio going in different directions. Then he made Chappie, that I really like Chappie, but a lot of people hate it. Because it's about a robot, an AI robot that it ends up being in with criminals. He's been built to show like a police force robot, and he ends up getting reprogrammed in with criminals and becoming a criminal, and everyone's calling it Short Circuit remaking. It wasn't. It was something else. It was a bit AI, how AI will develop. It was trying to take a less obvious route by taking AI and then throwing it into the world of crime and seeing what happens with it, seeing how it would react to an element it wasn't really designed for. And also taking the idea of corporate politics, of different people wanting different things. Like, you've got the industrial designers who are building the military, like the Hugh Jackman character, and how the different machinations of different type of development of technology goes on. So yeah, he's a director who has had his hit and misses. He's not as well regarded as he used to be, put it that way. And because of Chappie, he really get trashed. Even though I think Chappie was good, I think I think it looks better now than it did when it was released. I think people wanted something different. People thought they were going to get an AI film that was going to be really serious. And it was a serious film, because ultimately the ending suggests a dark fate for humanity. But they wanted something that was self-serious, and he gave them something that was silly on the surface, but actually was more serious below the surface. And he totally misjudged what they wanted and what the audience wanted. So that was a bomb. That was a genuine bomb he had there, and, well, what can you do? He was going to do an Alien film, that didn't work out. I would say we got the Ridley Scott ones, which didn't work out. So he's been having a career problem. So he was going to make a RoboCop film, and then they left that to do Demonic just before the. This was shot during the pandemic, so he tried to do something different. This was a low budget film, and it came out and it was absolutely hammered. I mean, it's been hammered by everybody. You know, it just is like, it was like, we do not want this film from you. We do not want it. We have no interest in it. It's one of those things where there was a complete rejection of what he wanted to do. Just when they heard demonic, they wanted an Exorcist film, basically. They wanted a film that was about demonic possession, and it was a traditional Exorcist type of film. They get with Last Exorcism and things like that. There's a type of exorcism film that they want, the audience wants. This is not it. This is more inspired by Exorcist 2, which the audience rejected horribly at the time. So this gives a chance of Exorcist 2, which is nice. Because this is the idea of going to people's dreams, just like Exorcist 2, and try to find the possessed figure within the dreams and try to figure out what's going on. And there's a lot of interesting things going on here, but there are misjudgments. Like, the idea is this business that's actually doing all this research into dreams and things like that, and helping figures who are criminals. So they're into the mind of this woman who's it's all scratched and everything else, and she's actually been arrested for a crime we don't know about early on, and we find out as we go on. The lead character is her daughter, who's in her like late 30s, who's been traumatized by what her mother did and won't talk about it, and she has very damaged relationships with her old friends because of that, because of just the trauma of it all. And that's where the film is not so good, because they're dealing. I don't think they had the cast they wanted. Like, the lead actress is fine, but she's not amazing in it or anything. Like, she has clunky moments. And all the other actors have the same kind of problem as they're enjoyable enough, but you're feeling if they had a slightly bigger budget, could afford actors who might have really have dug into it a bit more. As I said before, if he has problems with actors, they let them go. So you're going to get what you're going to get. And he didn't really have the kind of actors, the charisma at all. So also actors who could have said, look, this explains something we don't need to know. Because there's a couple of scenes earlier on where they explain stuff, it's like, you don't need to know that. Or, the way you're saying it, you don't need to know that. You can just do it by body language. And so some of the acting and some of the dialogue can be a bit soap opera at times. And that really pulls you out of the film. It really does. It's like one of those things, it's like, it can be a thing in genre that people can ignore, but sometimes it really pulls you out. In this film, it really pulls you out. There are other issues as well, like the organisation is doing it turns out to be tied to the church, and they're looking for possessed people, which the way they explain it is a bit too on the nose, and it needed a bit longer to develop and quietly. So the suspension of disbelief feels too quick. It's the patience too quick for you to get over disbelief. Plus, they suddenly put all these things, crucifixes in your face, and it's like you jump too fast into this. This is making it funny unintentionally. It's really hurting you. So those things, you kind of needed someone to say, no, that's too quick. You need to sort that. You need to put someone else in there to slow that down. Those are the kind of problems of the film. But there are a lot of good stuff to it, though. It's just as a film that is a flawed film. It's one of those things you've got to accept. Certain directors are going to make flawed films. And just because it's a flawed film doesn't mean it's worthless. Another example of a film which is very much like this is John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. That's a film I adore. It does not have... Some of its performances are not good. The atmosphere is great in it, but some of the performances are not good. It's a great score, great everything else. The ideas are terrific in Prince of Darkness, but it does have some weak performances. This film has that same problem, and that's a bunch of weird ideas. But the strength of it is some of the weirdness too. Like the idea of as you get into someone's mind, and they're doing it as almost an extension of computer graphics and what they were doing with it until the end of the world. The idea that into someone else's mind, if you're going from one person's mind to the other, if you're into someone's mind to try and find out what's wrong with them, it will not look perfect. It will look like computer graphicsy, and it turns out it's a simulation. It's like a very crude version of the Matrix, and it's a simulation which you place in the other person's brain to find out what's going on, because it's your mental image yourself going into the image set up by the person who you're trying to help. So it's a bit crude, and it's weird, and it's odd, but it's understandable. So you get stuff like you can see someone's t-shirt, the back of it through their head and things. The way it would look in a bad render, but it's intentional because it's rendering stuff really quickly to try and get this information across that this thing's happening, as it happens. And you get into this world of her mother. There's her daughter trying to figure out her mother. And even though there's flaws in the development of the film, that still is emotional, because it is the idea of someone trying to find out what happened to their mother and why she became a monster. And then as it goes on, it becomes about demonic possession. And that's interesting, the idea of this ancient monster that was within the land of this area that actually took possession of this woman and made her do some horrible stuff. Is interesting, it's tragic, because it's someone who you find out was a decent person who suddenly became this monster. And it's the scary part of that idea of someone being possessed, and the actual design of the monster is actually really well done. So there's lots of really cool things. Like the idea of floating through these memories and through these images and watching how it affects the lead character sleeping and waking up, and how you're starting to lose the feeling of what's real and what's not. Your sense of what's real and what's not is getting a bit loopy. The physicality of something's happening in a dream and it's affecting your real life causes possession, which makes you reminiscent of Nightmare on Elm Street, which I thought those things did that pretty cheesy as well. But I liked how they did it here. It is kind of feel kind of strange and odd. It is an interesting sci-fi take on demonic possession, very much akin to what Neil was trying to do with Quatermass films. It is trying to take something that's supernatural and try to show it as science. I mean, the film just has this kind of interesting take on it, and it's also quite interesting in the sense of the characters are repressed. They behave in the messed up ways that people behave, like people avoid the problems. They follow it, people try to tell them something because they think it's a bit weird. Anytime she's told, the character told about demonic possession by her pal, she reacts the way a normal person reacts, like, you're crazy, and she doesn't speak to this person for years, rather than, oh, is it really? Which always drives me nuts in movies. It's like always this thing is like, oh, someone tells you this possession thing, or I will get instantly believe it. It's like, no, you wouldn't. So this film actually does that kind of stuff. So even though some of the dialogue's not aggravated, maybe they could have had better actors in some places, it still works because the characters are weird and messy, which I liked, even though it's an kind of soap opera way at times. So that's weird mix. Is like you've done another draft or two of the script to get that down better, and maybe more rehearsals and might have worked better. It's just one of those things that feels like it was rushed into. This film feels like rushed into production. It feels like it wasn't ready to go when they started filming it. Like it still needed that extra draft or two just to kind of get it right. Because the final third goes into more horror cliches that are enjoyably done. There is some nasty moments, but it feels like a director who's really a sci-fi director trying to do horror. And yet feel he'd rather do the weird stuff, but he has to try and deliver on the horror stuff. And it's like there was a genuine disconnect. Like, he's a sci-fi director, not a horror director, and he doesn't always have the greatest instinct for horror, for the kind of supernatural and the sense of this makes sense emotionally, even though it seems absurd and why is it still scary. He doesn't really have that as a director, but he is good with the technology and the weirdness of technology and how the technology affects people. It's just that I think if it wasn't doing it as some film called Demonic, it might have worked better. It might have made him forced him to actually deal with the characters more, and maybe bring another director to try and figure it out a bit more. So it is kind of thing where two films have been mashed together, and one film is more interesting than the other. But both bit elements have interesting bits to them. It's just that the demonic possession stuff has the church conspiracy thing, which just feels a bit silly. But this is still worth seeing. This is a film made by an interesting director. It's going to be one of his minor films in his career. It just is. It's just not as interesting as other films. But it does have cool stuff to it. It's just very flawed. I think if you go into that knowing it's a flawed film by a talented guy, it's not one of his better films. But it's one of those films I think that maybe needed to make, really, and hopefully that will kind of push him to something that's more coherent in the future. I think it's probably one of those films. You see directors do this sometimes where they make a film that maybe is not completely successful, but they're figuring something out, and which leads to the better stuff later down the line. I think this may be one of those kind of films. Maybe a necessary sidetrack for something. I'm hoping that's what it is, because you can still see there's talent involved. But it is doing a low budget. Sometimes you feel that he could have spent, maybe if he had more money, could have made the visuals more arresting. Because the visuals aren't the most stunning things ever in this film either. There are some moments of it that are really good, but they tend to be tied to the effects. There is a lot of stuff there that's interesting, but it isn't the most. It doesn't quite pop visually as much as it should. But I still enjoyed it though. So I hope this video interests you. This is my conflicted look at Demonic, which is still worth seeing. So I'll see you later with another video. Right, bye for now.